Hey, welcome back. So second time lucky. Let's hope the start to spring isn't mired with my terrible technology. So anyway, hopefully you didn't see my first attempt where everything was looping. So anyway, if you are returning, I just want you to know that I completely appreciate you. I really thank you for coming back, and hope that today brings you some really useful information for the season ahead. Because today, obviously, we're talking about the spring equinox and tomorrow's new moon in Aries. This is a live forecast, and we're really going to talk about how we're getting into spring. If you are new to this channel, a big welcome. I know I'm getting lots of new subscribers all the time, so feel free to ask questions. This is alive, and I'm really happy to ask questions as they come up. So the chat room is open, feel free. So just before we get going, I just want you to know that the charts I'm using today, I'm using the UK as the set location. So for instance, you're probably aware that Greenwich Mean Time, which originates in London, that's kind of like the medium point for all time throughout the planet. You know, if you're to the east of Greenwich, you'll have I'm just trying to work this out. If you'll have less hours, you'll be ahead of Greenwich Mean Time, and if you're to the west, you'll be behind Greenwich Mean Time. So I'm setting the charts for that, and I'm using the tropical system just so that you know. But anyway, what I'm going to do today is have a look at the solstice chart for the moment that the not the solstice, the spring equinox chart for the 20th of March, and it starts at 21:25. That's UK time. And I will also be looking at the new moon chart, which is a new moon in Aries, which starts on the 21st of March. So it's like we've got this portal of Aries energy, because the spring equinox is essentially about the sun going out of Pisces and into the sign of Aries. Now, for those of you that may not already know, when the sun goes into the sign of Aries, that marks the start of the astrological new year. So it's pretty special. And that little space between the sign of Pisces and the start of Aries, some of us call it 0 point energy. It's like this potential. It's like the clearing of the old decks and the welcoming of the new. Now I can see I've got a comment. Richard Laws is joining me from Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. Welcome. I don't think I've ever seen you before, Richard. So welcome to the channel. Hope it's good. And I hope you weren't the one that got kicked out of the previous attempt at doing this show. Yeah, let us know where you're joining me from, and also if you've got a question. So let's keep this brief. I don't know if you can hear, I've actually the other side of quite a nasty cold. So I'm trying to do this before I lose my voice again. So let's bring up this chart and see what's coming up. So let me just make that a little bit bigger. This is a naked version of the chart. Now I'm calling it naked because, in fact, let me just take out that and create a little bit more space. I'm calling it naked because it is just the planets of our solar system, and I haven't added in any old gubbins. You know, I haven't added in lots of extra time. As you can see, this is set for the 20th of March 2023 at 21:25. That's UK time. The only extra thing I've got is Chiron. This is the symbol for Chiron here, which looks like a key turned on its side. I keep Chiron in all my charts because I think it really does have quite a lot of information for us. Chiron is also known as the winged healer. And you'll see here, Chiron is so close to Jupiter, but that's a whole nother story and a whole nother video. There is a video in my back catalogue, which is called Heal Thyself. And it's about the conjunction that we've just had between Chiron and Jupiter. But anyway, on to the solstice. So it's not the solstice. Why do I keep calling it the solstice? The equinox. Let me just go back to that. I think I'm a bit all befuddled from my false start to this show. So anyway, you can see here, this is as big as I can get it. We've got the sun, and it's 0 degrees 00, and it's right on it's just in the sign of Aries. And you can see these lovely blue lines here. This is showing connections between the Sun to Pluto and to Saturn. We've also got a connection in red to Mars. And what I'm going to do is sort of interpret these. But actually, the very, very first thing that I want to share has nothing to do with the Sun and the position of Saturn and Pluto and Mars, but about this lovely conjunction between Venus and this here that looks like a top hat or a pair of legs, a pair of cartoon legs. This is the North Node, which is very much to do with the collective karma and destiny of mankind. Now, Venus, you may well know as the planet of love. You may know her as the planet that is about comfort and ease. It's where things are graceful. You know, it's about togetherness. It's about flow, and it's about sharing the values of love and compassion and generosity. So Venus is lovely, and the fact that Venus is in this conjunction with the North Node, to me, is like I think it's something that we need to bear in mind as we head into this new season, this season of spring in 2023. I think this is our ultimate message, and it's saying whatever happens, this season is about people coming together. This season is about daring people to love again and to reconnect, and not to see each other as an other. I really think, in recent times, in recent years, for the last 3 years at least, there's been this very strong othering that's been going on, whereby people have been pulled apart from each other, or we've pulled ourselves apart, in fact, you know, through political thoughts and thinking, through thinking about medicine, and also the route to natural health and recovery, through all sorts of things to do with the finance and where we are. You know, what I've seen over the last 3 years is that people have been relocating, they've been rejigging, they've been reformulating their families and their friends. And people at the start of 2023, I think it's safe to say we're all quite tired of being quite separate. And so seeing Venus and the North Node in such a tight conjunction at the very start of the spring equinox, to me, is an indication that whatever is going on is happening, and the sum result of it is to bring us back together. Because the sun, the moon, Mercury, Mars, and Venus, they really show the effects on us, the effects on our personality, the effects on how we live in a real and tangible way. Whereas, you know, Pluto and Neptune and Uranus here, these are our outer planets. They really show what's going on at a generational level, at a world level. And then I always see Saturn and Jupiter and Chiron as the conduits from the outer planets and the world events. And it's those three help us to translate what's going on in the world and how to make it personal. So this Venus and North Node in a conjunction, to me, is an indication that personally, whatever goes on, no matter how terrifying it is, no matter how easy it is, no matter how challenging it might be in terms of world banking and things like that, I actually think whatever is going on is bringing us closer together. So that's the first thing that I really want to emphasize. I really, truly do. Because we need some of this, don't we? We need a little bit of this feeling of togetherness, that we're going to stand by each other. We're going to reclaim our reputation as being part of the human family. Now, there's lots to cover. So that's my little thing about Venus and the North Node. It really wouldn't surprise me if more and more people find themselves gravitating towards relationships. One of the reasons for this, I'm just going to go to my other chart. You'll see there's a lot more, suddenly there's a lot more things in the chart. And that's because I've added in some standard asteroids that I quite often use. In particular, this one here, which is Juno. Juno is also known as the goddess of marriage. She's also known as Hera, according to whether you're Greek or Roman. You know, a lot of people have their preference, but essentially she's a goddess of marriage, commitment, dedication, sensuality. So seeing her also in such a tight connection to Venus and the North Node. And now this is a bit arbitrary. This is, you know, obviously based in UK time. And so this is what is giving me the descendant here. The descendant is about partnership and everybody that's outside of yourself. And so what I'm really seeing is this sense that we're all partnering. Now, obviously, that may well be statistically impossible that everybody finds their partner on the planet, but there is this feeling that we are coming back together, we are reconnecting. And so I'm quite hopeful for people that are meeting significant others during this time. It feels like there is a season of love coming, which not everyone's going to pick up on or say or share, I don't suppose. Most people, I think, are going to be talking very much about Pluto and Saturn, which they're pretty strong right now. Let's just whiz back and see if there are any questions. No questions so far, so let's carry on then. So yeah, Venus and partnering, I think, is really important. Now, I think the big news at the moment is that Pluto is about to change signs. He's changing signs on the 23rd of March, going from the sign of Capricorn into the sign of Aquarius. I'm going to be recording about Pluto tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. You will see that very shortly on my channel. And Pluto is going to be in the sign of Aquarius for a few months before going back into Capricorn. And by January of next year, I think he goes in for good and will be there for a good 20 odd years. And, Pluto, he takes his time in a sign. And when he goes through this sign, he changes and transforms really how society is and how society acts, and changes a lot of the norms. You may well find at the moment there are lots of norms towards almost rebooting humanity. There is this over the last few years, as Pluto's been getting closer and closer to the sign of Aquarius, and also since Saturn, which is also about laws and logistics and governments, I think, very much so. I see Pluto as the hand behind the government, but we've had a very, very strong Aquarius sort of influence in recent times, and during that time there's been so much more information about critical race theory, gender, what's right and wrong in terms of gender and race and how we approach everybody. And then even more recently, we've had the relaunch of, or the launch of, ChatGPT. So there's this very strong AI message or narrative going on right now, and just in the last week or two I've seen images that have been created purely out of AI, and I think I will be talking about this actually on my Pluto and Aquarius video for sure. So I really do see, as Pluto is coming into this just a few days after the start of spring, the official start of spring, we're going to see an emergence of all of these subjects coming up in our consciousness and in the narrative that you hear on the news and celebrity, etc., etc. It's going to take a lot of prominence. But Pluto, which is about transforming, is in a very helpful relationship to the sun. Now, the sun represents our personality, our ego, if you like, very much about our outward expression. In the sign of Pisces, in the sign of Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, it's very much about identifying ourselves and knowing who we are. It's the start of our year. It's us getting really clear about our new path. And with this sextile to Pluto, it feels like we're really transforming how we see ourselves and our relationship to ourselves. Now, Pluto is essentially showing up, I think, if we're looking at like a world chart with the sun at the ascendant, we would actually say that Pluto is having quite a strong effect and influence on us from a term of networks, through social media, through peer groups. So I think we're really transforming at a collective level right now. And, there will be a very strong tranche of people who are going full AI, almost gender non-binary. People are not wanting to identify themselves in very, very like determined ways. There is definitely this influence towards almost humans being rebranded and relaunched, like humanity 2.0, if you like. So there is a very sort of interesting new twist coming in, and it's too early to say how that's going to go, and what the ramifications of that are. And like I say, I'm going to be talking about that in much greater detail tomorrow. Saturn is at 1 degree in the sign of Pisces and is in a semi-sextile to the sun. Now, where Pluto is transforming and helping us rebrand ourselves, Saturn is almost rewiring how we're thinking in terms of our consciousness, in terms of our what's hidden. Like Saturn is essentially sitting in a place of our undoing or in our blind spot. So it's interesting that Saturn's there. I've recorded something. I think I can't remember the title, but it's basically about a new form of spirituality, or a groundedness of spirituality, which is, I think, where Saturn traditionally has gone to when he's been in Pisces. But there is this feeling that spiritual issues are becoming a lot more prominent, and they're becoming a lot more embodied. So it would be interesting to see what's going on there. But Saturn is essentially working quite well with the sun in this season. So we've got Saturn and Pluto working quite well with the sun. It's pretty heavy. It's a lot of hard work, actually. It's encouraging us to let go of who we thought of ourselves as, and to think in different terms as to how we relate to each other and who we are and what we believe. So we're all being very, very, I would say, challenged. Wherever Pluto is showing up in relationship to our charts, he's challenging us for sure. As anyone who's had Pluto go over an ascendant, the sun, the moon will attest. I'm putting my hand up. I've had 2 of those, and he's gone over most of my personal planets. So he definitely does transform. Now, let me just see if there's any questions coming in. I can see there's a couple of comments. Richard is saying you're a 59-year-old from a 59-year-old Aquarius. That's cool. Have you just had your Saturn return, your second Saturn return? And how did you get on with it? Now, this is quite an interesting time for you. If you've just had your Saturn return, and Saturn's moving forwards, Richard, that's going to be, I think, giving you chance to really reshape how you are. And with your ascendant in Aries, this is kind of like your time of year, actually, as things are getting more prominent. So this is quite an exciting time. I wonder how you got on with your return. Thank you for that. So let's carry on a little bit more. And also with your ascendant in Aries, Richard, I would say tomorrow's new moon in Aries will also be very, very useful as well. Okay, so yeah, another thing I like about this new season chart is the fact that we've got the moon and Neptune also in a conjunction. So it's really dreamy and very spiritual, very empathic, very much full of compassion. The moon and Neptune together, often, especially in the sign of Pisces, really leaves us feeling quite vulnerable. Now, nobody watching this, unless you're really, really ancient, nobody watching this will actually have Neptune in the sign of Pisces at birth. But you may well have your moon in Pisces. I do. And for anyone with the moon in Pisces, you all know that you feel quite delicate. Very easily, it's very easy to nudge you and kind of poke you and have an oversensitive reaction. So right now we've got Neptune, who I think adds a very nondescript, unboundaried spirituality and creativity into the world. And right now, like Neptune really creates, I think, emotional havoc at times, because it's so creative, and it really asks us to merge with something. So it asks us almost to forget who we are. The planet of Neptune, I think, is very much about losing ourselves through creativity. Now, on maybe the lower side of the spectrum, if we've got a very sort of maligned or difficult Neptune in our charts, we may very well try and lose ourselves with drink and drugs, inappropriate sex, anything really to help us forget who we really are. But when Neptune is really well aspected and supported in a chart, it really helps us to connect with infinity or connect with everybody, so we kind of merge out of ourselves and feel that sense of oneness and connection, maybe through meditation or transcendental arts. And so having the moon here in a conjunction with Neptune, I think in this new season, it could actually really work quite well with this Venus North Node energy of extra love in this season. To me, it looks like there could be a bit of a global awakening where we start to forgive each other. And then realize actually there's nothing to be forgiven, where we start to have more genuine compassion for people that feel differently to us, that have a different viewpoint, where we realize actually how when we say the problem with you is, or you need to open your mind, or you need to do this, or you need to, we're coming into a time actually where we start losing some of that language, and we're starting to realize that when we're judging each other, we're actually really judging ourselves. We're really saying more about ourselves. So I do think compassion and empathy and creativity is going to rise. And of course, every time somebody gets more and more awakened and more and more connected to the rest of us, I think the more it is likely to happen. So I see it as a sort of exponential shift, an exponential rise for people, that actually whatever's going on, we need to be committed to supporting each other, loving each other, and trying to understand each other. So if somebody says something and you're feeling triggered, which is definitely going on with this emphasis going on right now. And I would imagine that Richard, who has his ascendant in the sign of Aries, and who's just had his Saturn return in recent times, I would imagine that he has felt very triggered with Jupiter and Chiron in the sign of Aries in this conjunction. People are still very snippy and where people are feeling triggered, and they may well launch into an attack with lots of accusations and this, that, and the other. Or maybe you're doing that, by saying, what you need to do. I actually see that rather than counterattacking, we might actually start to open up the conversation with, it's interesting that you'd say that. Tell me a bit more. So if we don't immediately go into this feeling threatened, we may well find a lot more comes out of life. So I'm quite sort of heartwarmed by seeing this in the charts. The next theme that I want to talk about is just this very strong trine between Mars in the sign of Gemini and this Saturn in the early degrees of Pisces. So we've got Saturn and Mars. Now, this is, I think, a little bit troubling, but it's also quite strong. Like on a personal level, I think it really shows that we're getting things sorted out for ourselves. We can really start to take right action. We can start to see our direction a bit more clearly. And we're not afraid of hard work. There is definitely a lot of hard work emphasized in this. However, I do note that at times when there's potentially military interventions or lots of difficult warring factions, that both Mars and Saturn are usually highlighted. So it does feel like those that want to create war and those who are soldiers or military police officers and things like that will be much more easily connected and working more closely together. So, on a personal level, I think it's good for us because we're starting to really get clear about what we need to do to achieve the goals we're wanting. On a global level, it looks like, I guess if we were to say as above, so below, what we might find is, we are looking at particular conflicts in our own personal lives and we're able to take action on them. Of course, if we move that up to a more global and government scale, the way governments may choose to eradicate conflicts is by taking decisive action and saying, this is what we're going to do. So that doesn't look quite so negotiable. It doesn't look so much like we're going to have conversations and open up about it. But I do definitely see that more for humanity. Before I move on to the new moon, I also just want to share that, and anyone who follows the news will have noticed that in recent times we have had a shift in the markets. So, for instance, there's been news about the Silicon Valley Bank and other banks being like Credit Suisse and stuff. So there's lots of little murmuring going on about things happening. I'm seeing lots of people talking about potential crashes. What I would say is, having looked at financial astrology, the markets definitely go into insecurity when planets change signs. And so in March, we've had Saturn change sign on the I think it was the 12th, but it's changed signs into the sign of Pisces. We've got Pluto changing signs. This is also the month of the equinox, which is really, really strong. We've also got Mars changing signs. Now, this is kind of interesting because Mars, Saturn, and Pluto are known as the malefics. These are known as the more difficult manifesting planets of the solar system. So we've got the two benefics, which is Jupiter and Venus, and they always have this kind of feel good feeling. And then you've got Saturn, Mars, and Pluto, which tend to kick our butts quite a bit and show up really quite insidious patterns at times. So it's interesting that all three of those, which can all represent bullying, can all represent military and fighting and conflict. They're all changing signs, as is the sun this month. Mercury is also changing signs twice, which isn't necessarily abnormal. Venus is also changing signs, which again isn't it's not abnormal, but it feels quite significant that that Saturn, Mars, and Pluto are all changing signs in the same month. And then in May, we've also got Jupiter changing signs. This is really going to create a lot of instability in the market. If you are somebody who has investments linked to the stock exchange, I would, this is a time to be a bit more cautious and really look at, if you believe what the news is saying, i.e., oh, it's all steady, it's all going to be fine. If you're listening to Janet, whatever her name is, it Janet Yellen, saying, oh no, we're stabilizing everything, there's nothing to worry about. If you're listening to any administration saying nothing to see here, you want to look a bit deeper. I'm not telling you to take any particular action, but stay aware. These are times when there is a big change in stocks and shares. And later on this year as well, we've got Venus going retrograde, which also corresponds with changes in the banking system and how things are valued. It's a great time to sell during the time when Venus is retrograde, because people tend to overinflate in their heads the true value of things. But it's a terrible time to buy, because you're most likely to buy with this idea that it's worth more than it actually is. So there are some significant times when I can see, and also later on this year, the North Node is changing signs as well. Again, another indication. So we've got a lot more signs of instability in terms of the world economics in this year. So take that as a little bit of information. If that is of interest to you, research it. I can see we've also got some comments from Colleen Murphy. Thanks, Colleen. She's saying, Obrigada, Louisa, because I'm from Portugal. I'm living in Portugal. That's Portuguese for thank you. And she's saying, rest up and be well soon. Thank you. I think I'm the right side of my cold now, but you can probably still hear it. So Richard who has lots of Aries stuff going on. He said 10 years of chemo, clear of cancer now. Congratulations. I'm pleased to hear that. I use some alternative treatments. I'm a big fan of those, I have to say. Family fell apart during this. I'm really sorry to hear that. My mum had cancer about 25 years ago, and I know the sort of pressure that can put on a family for sure. Moving on alive, but on my own. So this is one of these very strong times for you, Richard. Thank you for sharing that so openly on this live show. I really appreciate that. And hopefully with this new moon in Aries, which I'm going to talk to you about now, this might also give you an idea as to how you might want to reset your intentions and kind of ground and start to look forwards. Must have been a really traumatic time for you with all those changes that you've been through. And I'm quite sure that if we were to look at your chart, we would find out that there's a big planet going over one of your angles, as often happens when we go through 10 years or so of something very, very difficult. It's very, very challenging. Right, let me have a look at, let me bring up the new moon. So this is the naked new moon chart. What I mean by this is it's just the planets. Now, again, this is set for London time. So the new moon happens at 21st of March, 2023 at 5:23 p.m. That's London time. If you want to look this up for your local time, then I recommend you go to www.timeanddate.com. And it's a really fantastic, is it time and date? Yeah, timeanddate.com. It's a fantastic place. It's got all the sunrise, sunsets, moonrise, moonsets. It's got all of the moon cycles, season changes, anytime there's an eclipse. It's really, really useful. And it will see through the cookies on your computer. It will see exactly where you're located and give you the exact time of new moons and full moons. So anyway, for lots of people, the new moon represents a time of growth. The moon moves, it's got to its smallest where you can't see it anymore. And thereafter the new moon, the moon just starts to grow again for the next 2 weeks until the full moon. Now, during the time of the new moon, what happens is we're in a growth phase. It's known as the waxing moon phase. And horticulturalists alike will know that the waxing phase is where you're planting your seedlings, where you get most growth. It's very good for your roots and stuff. Your hair grows faster during this time. If you have your hair cut during a waxing phase, for instance, in the next 2 weeks, your hair is likely to grow faster than if you have it cut during the waning phase after the full moon to the new moon. So the new moon is all about growth energy, which is perfect for spring, actually. And if you think of the spring equinox, that is also about, the ground is primed and it's time for everything to start shooting through all those fresh green shoots. That's the theme. So at the time of this new moon, and it is at 0 degrees in the sign of Aries, which, like I said at the start, 0 degrees is known as 0 point energy. It's seen as magical, a bit like when you go to a magic act and you see a magician showing you an empty hat and then he puts his hand in and you don't know what he's going to pull out, and there, he pulls out a rabbit or a string of flags or something, or underwear, who knows what. But the 0 degrees energy is very much like putting your hand into the universe and not knowing what you're going to pull out, but there's possibility. And that's the thing, there is this sense of possibility. So we are starting our astrological new year and our new lunar year, I guess, with this new moon setting at 0 degrees in the sign of Aries. This is really, really special. And if I was in your shoes right now, I may well choose, in fact, I'm probably going to do this myself, but I may well sit down and celebrate this with an intention, some statements, a mantra, or a meditation or visualization. I may well sit down with a pen and paper and start dreaming big. The energy of Aries is about taking action, and it's very much about really knowing who you are, finding an individual path. It is about doing it on your own and having strength at doing it on your own. It is also about not pussyfooting around anymore. All the energies have just most recently been in the sign of Pisces, which is all about being a bit unsure, being a bit uncertain, and being very swayable. Whereas when we go into the sign of Aries, it's strong, shooting energy, So it is about taking action and knowing that you're strong enough to do it in a way that Pisces, just the energy is not quite there. So this is really good about anything to do with finding your personal identity, taking the next big step forward. The sign of Aries is very courageous. It's a go-getter. It's good at starting new things like new projects, new businesses, a new launch, a new campaign. It's super, super strong. So use the new moon to sit and collect your thoughts and start this new moon with a sense of determination and courage, and know that it's warming you up. This is happening in the sign, in the element of fire. So you got the sun and the moon in the element of fire. It's going to warm everything up. It's going to get everything going. It's like, let's get this party started already. Now, you'll also see these very strong red lines. That's a square to Mars. Mars, again, is actually the ruler of Aries. So it's interesting that the moon and the sun are in a connection with Mars. The square is really challenging us more so than ever. It's almost like if you don't even make a step forwards, life is going to challenge you to take a big leap. So if I was in your shoes, I would just think, okay, what do I need to do? How can I use this leaping energy? Because if you don't choose to leap, you may well find that you're forced to. And it's always better to do it of your own volition than it is to kind of do it when you're being pushed, because you're never ready. You're quite resentful then, and it often flops. So what I would suggest is to kind of fly forward fast. Allow this energy to lift you up so you can move much faster than usual. And this square with Mars, it's not necessarily going to make it easy, but it's going to give you a lot of grit to get things done. I've looked at the charts of lots of famous people, and actually, they're not my favorite people to look at, but I do like when I hear a good story, like I connect with people day to day. And, every now and again, I hear about CEOs of small companies or people that have built something up out of nowhere. And I'm always really fascinated about what their charts look like. Or people that go through massive life changes and they turn it around. I'm always looking at their charts, and the most successful people that turn their life around, yes, they have a lot of these blue, easy aspects, but they have tons of red as well, which gives them the resolve, the confidence, and the chutzpah to just get it done. They just dive right in. They don't wait. They don't pussyfoot. They just pull their finger out their arse and they get going. So there you go. This is the month to do it, and also the season to do it. Last thing then that I really want to share with you, and I think actually it's this thing here, like Pluto right now at the start of this season is in a square with Venus and also the North Node. So right at the start, I did share that I think this is a time to realize that we're all coming back together karmically. Humanity has been pulled apart so far at the seams that it's just so painful. And the best way for us to feel ease is to just work back towards each other. Now, I think this square with Pluto and between Venus and Pluto, and I know this energy because my own Venus and Pluto are in a tight square in my chart. It's not easy energy to work with, but it's energy where we often feel scapegoated, and it's energy where we often feel bullied, oppressed, and also that love doesn't come easily. People with a square of Pluto and Venus in their charts often feel like they have to people please. They have to work so much harder for things to work out. And what they don't realize is if they were just themselves, they may well be liked anyway. And the other thing is, not everyone is going to like you exactly as you want to be liked. So I also think that not only is this a time of us coming back together, but I think this could actually be quite traumatic for people who believe that they are still being scapegoated, who at some level have their identity in being scapegoated. And I think the pain of it is actually when we realize that we are actually loved. When we actually allow the energy of universal love to hit us and to kind of open us up, that could be extremely painful. To use a personal experience, a little while ago, I had this experience where I realized that I'd been very cruel to myself. In feeling scapegoated, I'd been reading a book by Dr. Dane Here, who I love, by the way. You can see him on the Access Consciousness website, and you can go to Dr. Dane Here on YouTube and check out his work. But anyway, he's written this book called The Body Whisperer, or Body Whispering, something like that. And so I thought it was time to really start listening to my body. And I caught myself in the act of talking really badly to my body. And I thought, crikey, if I spoke to anyone like that, I'd be heartbroken, to be bullying like that. But I realized that where I'd felt scapegoated in my life, it was a language that I was just using on myself. And it was one of the hardest realizations I had. I felt so heartbroken that I could have been so cruel to myself. So my last comment then really is, I think there are going to be people that struggle with the amount of love that is available to them. Um, that the pain of fully opening up could actually break your heart wide apart. When you see little kids, and this is probably the easiest thing to see, sometimes you see little kids being brave. They don't want to cry because they know that there's going to be pain behind their eyes. They know they're going to sob. They know it's going to change them at some level. And there's a part of them already that is trying to be brave, trying to be tough. Because if we allow ourselves to be truly vulnerable, it could hurt a little bit. So my biggest bit of advice is, in this season ahead, allow yourself to feel the pain of opening up. Allow yourself to crack open. Even if you do feel completely vulnerable, it's in our vulnerability that we move on as a human race. So anyway, on that bombshell, so much love to you. Thank you so much for listening, wherever you've been listening into. If you're a new subscriber, thank you so much. If you haven't yet subscribed, consider it. If you find this useful, feel free to share it. I love you all, and I wish you a beautiful season ahead, and I look forward to being in contact with you all very soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.